Bitterroot Mountains, just south of Hamilton. Has anyone spent any time over in the Bitterroot Mountains or in Missions? Yeah. Some things that you probably know that are unique about the Bitterroot is that it's this really cool long mountain range that has like 20 plus different canyons that are going east to west. And El Cap in particular is one that you don't get to ski very often because the Bitterroots are at pretty low elevation, and so you don't always get a fat enough snow year to ski it. The first time that it was skied was in 2009 by a local Missoulian named Brian Story. And then after that, he took a couple other male friends. And the last time that it was skied was in 2014. So Ned Gall is my husband. We have been eyeing this peak for a really long time, like for years. Anytime we drive south of Hamilton, we're taking pictures of this face and seeing if this is the year that it's going to be in. And luckily for us, in 2023, it was. But before I get too far into this really great story, there's a part of me that I want to share with you all. Obviously, I'm Quinny. I'm a mental health clinician in Missoula, and the thing that I do is that I respond to 911 mental health crises calls along with law enforcement or firefighters, and mental health is like a big part of my world now. And so tonight I'm going to be talking about skiing this really cool face, but I'm also going to be talking about mental health, and I'm going to be sharing a story about an experience with someone who is suicidal. And this is a tough thing to talk about here, and I bet you didn't come here thinking you're going to hear this conversation tonight. But Montana in the last 40 years has been ranked as like one of the top 5 states to have the highest suicide rate, and so it feels like we have to talk about it. There is such a stigma in this state for it, and there's also like a lack of behavioral health services. And I am so grateful that it is changing in the state. It is getting better, even though it's really slow. But here, I want to make sure, please take care of yourself. If you need to walk out, I wouldn't be offended or anything like that. And talk to me afterwards. So, east face of El Cap. It is the second tallest mountain in the Bitterroot. It's just shy of 10,000 feet. And Ned drew a little Q and N at the top, and you can see our little stick figures. This is our little route, you can see. You start at Little Rock Creek Trailhead, and it's about a 9-mile approach. And as you can see, this face is steep. It's exposed, and it's committing. And I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I apologize for my coughing. It's 2,000 feet, it's 50 to 55 degrees at the top, and you can kind of see in that traverse cliff that it's tricky. You gotta be on top of your route finding, and really, you gotta be confident when you get out on it. It was tricky to time conditions, because not only does it not come in every year, but when it was such a fat season, the springtime was we didn't have a lot of cold freeze nights, and it was tough to time the day. So we had tried it a couple of times before we actually skied it successfully. It was, I want to say the first time we couldn't even make it to the trailhead. Second time we got up there and it was terrible visibility. So on April 29th, we were like, okay, this is the last night that we're gonna get a good hard freeze, and we might as well try, because this is the last time this year we'll get a chance. So, we camp at the trailhead, and that's Ned. If anybody knows Ned, you know that he cannot sleep in to save his life, and he will set an alarm, but he will always wake up before the alarm. When you're married to someone like that, it's kind of hard sometimes. But, so at midnight, I remember, the plan was that we were gonna wake up at midnight and leave the car at 1 a.m. And he considers me like a rabid Wolverine in a very loving way in the morning, whereas like Ned's very much a fluffy bunny all the time when it comes to morning time. So plan was midnight, but at 11:45, Ned rolls over and he's like, hey Quinn, I know it's not midnight, but can we get up? I'll make you coffee. So here we go, 11:45, we wake up. We leave a little bit before 1, and the first steps on right next to the trail, I step into the snow and I immediately just post hole all the way up to my thigh. And I take the next step, post hole all the way through. And it's pretty disheartening when you know you wanted a good freeze the night before and you know at the trailhead that you didn't get that. It's like, dang. But it's 1 a.m., we're awake, I got coffee in me. We decide to go up to the lake, which is like probably 5 to 6 more miles, and decide kind of like at the lake, if it is locked up, then we'll keep going. And we actually got really lucky. At the lake, the snow was feeling good, and so we kept cruising on. Whoa, PowerPoint, come back. We decided to climb the face. You could also take this mellow shoulder to skin up, but for us it was really important to kind of get an idea of what the conditions were going to be like on that face and what it was going to be like to even find the traverse and ski through it. The photo on the right, you can barely see, but kind of at the far end is like the steep crux where there's all these like rocks, and then you have the cliffs below it. And Ned is this, he's like part Sasquatch, part Greek god. He's like 6'4", really big guy, and I'm obviously not that. And for him, it was the rock and the snow had created this like cavity that was like 4 to 5 feet separate. And for him, it was just this like high foot. But for me, I was like, we had our crampons, we had our ice tools, and I felt like I was Sylvester Stallone in Cliffhanger, just like throwing as high as I could, holding on, and just like kind of doing an awkward beach whale move over it. And, I mean, you all are climbers. You get like, it's one thing to be able to get up, but then when you realize you have to come down, you're like, oh, well, that's future Quinn problem. We'll see how that goes. We get to the top around 8:30 a.m. and we're so lucky. It is calm, clear, sunny. It is a beautiful day. And then I take like a few, just like maybe 20 minutes to let the snow warm up a little bit. And I watch Ned take a lot of turns. Ned's taking beautiful turns. You can tell it's just like type 1 fun until it wasn't. At one point, it's like probably a couple 100 feet down when I see Ned's tails slide out from underneath him, and I hear that dreaded, I think you probably know what that means. And then I hear him yell, ice! And again, like, it's terrible to see any of your partners, but then to have your husband, you see, like, make this, like, pretty big slide mistake. But luckily, Ned was able to catch himself, readjust, put his tool in, and then he had to kind of sidestep down part of it. And at this point, I'm up at the summit, and I'm getting puckered. I'm just by myself with my thoughts, which is not always the best place for me to be. And I have my friend coined this term, the committee of tiny Quinns, where it's kind of like this little like self-doubt voices are just like swarming around you like a little mosquito, and you keep swatting them away, thinking they're not a big deal, but then they never leave. And that's what was happening to me. And the committee of tiny Quinns, let me tell you people, they are brutal, brutal. And you know, it starts very small, like, who thought this was a good idea? I'm trying to blame Ned, but I apparently agreed to this idea, so I'm the real idiot here. They start to get a little bit bigger, like, man, I just got these used skis, and I'm on, like, new used boots, and new to me anyways, and I haven't skied them enough, I can't do it. And then I keep just making excuses to, like, you know what? I haven't pooped today. You can't ask me to do anything. Right? I mean, you feel so much better about things after you pooped, and this hasn't happened. Physically, I wasn't feeling super strong. I was just getting over like some medical stuff and an injury, and I wasn't super strong. But I realized I'm never feeling like the most strong I've ever felt until after I do something. Then I keep these thoughts, the self-doubt gets bigger to the like, who the hell do I think I am? Why do I think I'm good enough to do this? And then it gets worse to, what if the what if start? And those are bad. The what if I fall? What if Ned has to get me at the bottom of these cliffs? What if I'm putting us in danger? And then the worst of, I can't do this. And you're standing on this summit, having these thoughts in your head, and then the worst of the worst comes up. And it's I don't belong here. And I feel, when I started having that feeling, that's like, kind of like drop in your gut, like, oh shit, here I am. Not only do I have all this self-doubt about my ability, but I'm also feeling like I don't even belong. Like, how am I gonna pull myself out of this hole? Because I'm just up here by myself. And so this brings me, like, I remember kind of like watching Ned sit down, and it's taking a long time because you have to be pretty careful in there. And so I have enough time to kind of think, all right, like, Quinn, when was the last time you felt like you didn't belong? And for me, that's like almost every day I go to work. Again, I'm a mental health clinician. I work in the 911 system, and my goal is to really reduce negative interactions between law enforcement and people having in a mental health crisis. And it's taken a long time to have police officers and firefighters feel comfortable at requesting me on scene. And so I've had to prove myself a lot at my job, and to prove, like, yes, mental health belongs here. And I remember this one call early on, and I was still experiencing imposter syndrome quite a bit in my job. And we get called, a deputy in Missoula County calls us and says, hey, we have a 20-year-old in his 20s who is suicidal, and he's in the cemetery, and he's requesting our team to stage. And I was like, okay, we're staging. I'm probably not gonna get called. That means, like, we're just kind of in the back waiting to see if they want us. So 45 minutes in, the deputy asked for us. I'm like, oh crap, I didn't think this was happening. So I get on scene, and we're in the cemetery parking lot, and I enter the circle of everybody who's involved, and it is, I got male deputies on one side, I've got male city police officers, male firefighters, male FBI agent was there randomly. You got the SWAT team with the big Bearcat armored vehicle, and also like male firefighters, and an ambulance just happened to be all male. And then me and my partner, Alex, who's a female, we walk up into this scene. And gosh, it's kind of wild to share this story with you all. When I learn more from the family and from the deputy about what's going on with this individual. He had a pretty serious trauma happen that morning, and at that point, he was feeling like there was nothing that could make his pain go away other than by dying, which is a really hard and sad place to be. That's really scary. And he was sitting at his father and his brother's gravesite at the time. And when I learned from family is that both of those individuals died by suicide as well. And unfortunately, one of them had used a gun right when he learned that law enforcement were going to be involved. And so at this point, it was like clear to everybody that law enforcement was absolutely the wrong response in this moment. So I take a deep breath, and the deputy looks at me, and he's like, okay, here's the phone, it's all you. It's like, oh God, what? And at the time, you're surrounded by these men who have bulletproof vests, and they've got their belts with their guns and their taser, and they've got their badge, and I'm just showing up in jeans and a sweatshirt, and I have this little badge, little plastic badge, or name tag really, and I'm holding on to it for dear life, because it shows that I belong here, you know, and that's all I got. And I take a deep breath, and I spend the next 6 hours just deeply listening to this man tell me his story and what happened. I don't spend time trying to give him solutions, trying to tell him how things are going to get better, or try to tell him how much he's loved, because he knows those things. He's been talking to his family. All I do is really just like sit in the muck with him and just witness and recognize this deep pain he's experiencing in the moment. And after 6 hours, his sister and I were finally able to convince him to put the gun down and to come to the hospital with us. And I think about that experience when I'm up on top of this mountain, thinking about like, if law enforcement had gone, they probably would have had to push a little bit quicker. They wouldn't have been able to spend that much time with him, and it would have maybe been a different outcome. Not that it wouldn't have been a safe outcome, but just different. And so here I am on the summit, reminding myself, like, hey, the only person who is telling you you don't belong here is yourself, right? Like, there's literally no one else out there, and I bet there's probably some internalized misogyny going on in there. But I have to take that second to realize, Quinn, you are here because you purely and genuinely just love this type of skiing. This is what you love to do. So with that, I drop in, and every turn, this is just a no-fall zone, so you have it in your head that you're just not gonna fall. And every turn, you are making solid, every pull plate is right, and I get to the ice, and I have an experience with Ned where it's just very clear that you can't ski it. And so I sidestep down into the crux. The photo on the left, Ned took a couple weeks before, just to get an idea of what it looked like. And it looks actually not too bad, right? Like, fluffy, nice, not bad. But on the right, you can see that the snow is starting to melt, it's a little shimmery, a little crusty, and you can't tell, but you actually have to get air at the top there. You can't just like side slip down. Not great conditions, not ideal. But again, I already had this like little mini mental crisis at the top that I was like, okay, I've already gone through that. I know at this point I'm just gonna have to stop this landing and then slide right through. Luckily, Ned and I did that, no problem. And here I am on the left. You can see kind of the relief just roll over me that I did it. And then we had this lovely, although we still had 9 miles out, it was still pretty, I was just on cloud 9 the entire way out. It didn't matter at all. But with that said, I want to more emphasize, I just shared 2 really impressive stories about myself, but that's not the whole me. I'm also this person, where the one on the piece is the day that I turned around because I just wasn't feeling it. And you can see how bad the visibility is. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to turn around and meet peeps today. That's what I'm going to do. Or here I am on the Mission Traverse and trying to break trail, but the snow is isothermic, and I'm just collapsing into it every step, and I kind of want to cry. So for me, this presentation and just I want to remind everyone that we are all strength and struggle, and you can't be one without the other, and having that self-compassion to recognize that your badassery is going to look different depending on the day, depending on what you're going through. Some days it's going to look like skiing El Cap, but then other days it's going to look like being honest with yourself and recognizing you just went through something hard and that you might just need to take a break, and maybe you realize that you aren't in a place where you can be aware of your surroundings and make good judgments in the outdoors. I really like to go out there because I find it as a place of healing, but when I'm not able to be aware, then I need to recognize I need to stay home and maybe bake cookies. And with that, I do think this past year, my husband Ned was in a pretty serious ice climbing accident where our dear friend Kyle passed away. And it's been a hard year. And it was a year of both Ned and I just feeling like we couldn't push it. I just wasn't mentally in a place where I could. And luckily, Missoula didn't have a terrible snow year, so it made it a little easier. But what made it okay was knowing that I have this incredible community of women in my life who are looking out for me. My mom is here, my aunt is here, my niece, and I've got so many friends here tonight that make all the difference. And I feel like Broad Beta is that kind of community where it doesn't matter that Broad Beta is just gonna notice your badassery in whatever way it looks like. So thanks for listening.
Does anyone have any questions for Quinn Mawinney? I just like saying it.